Well, welcome back to the Disciplined Troublemakers podcast. I'm your host, Scott Shigori. Here on DT, we talk about scaling tech companies and helping CEOs do that with greater ease and flow. Today, we'll be talking with Jason Young. Jason is the founder and CEO of Pylon Cybersecurity, a firm he founded in 2011. Pylon helps security managers automate network compliance through real-time services, which ensures data accuracy and definitive chain of custody. In 2024, Jason and the team saved the Defense Health Agency, which is a combat support agency within the U.S. DoD that supports medical services and readiness for the Army, for the Navy, as well as for the Air Force, I believe, and saved them $25 million by optimizing their cyber compliance workflows, which is a big deal. Today, we'll be talking with Jason about the challenges and the opportunities of scaling cybersecurity companies, no small feat. And so, Jason, thank you for carving out time today to talk with us, and welcome to the Disciplined Troublemakers podcast.
Thanks, Scott. Appreciate it. Appreciate the reach out, too.
Yeah, you're welcome. You're welcome. It's always nice to reach out to folks, and if they're comfortable sharing, make sure that my audience and your new audience can go ahead and learn from what you and the team have actually done. So I guess to open it up, obviously I've shared a little bit on the intro here. I'm guessing there's going to be, more in terms of, both who your ideal audience is, if you have it, as well as kind of the key challenge and the key sauce around what you do. Is it, quote unquote, primarily focused around compliance, but usually compliance has lots of pieces to it, at least in my experience. So, right. What does that look like for you or for the team and the company?
Yeah, it's a good question. It's sometimes it is very murky when people say compliance. So I guess in our world, we're talking about the governance and regulatory frameworks around information technology. Okay. And so we're very focused around the U.S. government and primarily the Department of Defense, because they have a lot of IT regulation. They do, as you could imagine.
Yep.
So I guess what that means, I'll maybe share a little bit about why I even care about it, because it's not certainly not a hot topic in the news, right? IT compliance.
Yep, that's true. But it's important, though. I think, whether it's data, which is ultimately privacy, I mean, the costs associated with either getting it wrong in a ransomware attack, let alone being sued, I mean, it's instantly global, although DoD, obviously, quite a different market. It explodes in lots of pieces instantly. Yeah. And so it's not exciting maybe, but it's hugely important to get right.
Yeah, it's not the kind of sexy thing out in the news, but when breaches happen or when data is lost, like sometimes it's unquantifiable, the damage that happens. I mean, in the defense industry, like it could be national security. That I know that term gets thrown around a lot, but if you think about in our context, there's military men and women that are deployed out in the field, and if their medical records were to be compromised, or maybe the systems that are supporting some life-sustaining activities, like IT could actually lead to actual real death. I mean, we take it seriously.
Yeah. So
let me share. I started my career as a systems administrator. So think like turbo nerd, hands-on keyboards, doing the work. And I kind of got trial by fire into the defense industry of this regulatory kind of intense situation. We'll call it that. It's very intense, where it was like, we got to do this massive thing. And it was like, oh my gosh, like how in the world? So I had to learn very quickly on the technical side how to do that, how to implement these security controls. And then they had the opportunity to move to the other side, where I got to be the checker or the auditor, to audit folks like myself in the past. And so I got to see both sides of the house here, and that's kind of what inspired Pylon and kind of where we are today, where it was very manual. A lot of the rumors you hear about the government and their process, it's true. It's very manual, very labor driven. Lots of people like kind of pushing the noodle, and so and my passion was like it doesn't have to be this way. There's no way that this is the way the world works. Especially in at that time, 2011, I was like, the technology exists. Why are we not doing anything about it? And so that was the beginning there. So we started looking at, why is it so manual? Why is this so incredibly burdensome? And what can we do about it?
Yeah, no, I think that's true. I mean, before I've been doing more recent stuff, as a founder myself, worked for Raytheon and Northrop Grumman for many, many years, and did on the federal side, not on the DoD or intelligence community side. So no black box work, to be clear. And yeah, I mean, those processes exist for a reason, but the iteration of them or lack thereof is really challenging. And the data piece, as you mentioned just a few minutes ago, is a big deal. So did work for the federal government for a few years before pivoting into tech and working for Northrop and Raytheon. And that was at a period of time where OPM was hacked by nation state. And so, China has all my fingerprints. China has all sorts of data about me. And we could argue whether that's relatively safe on the grand scheme of things versus, private actors and things of that nature. But it's a big deal. It was me and quite a few million other people. There was absolutely nothing I could do with it, about it. I got a letter. They were thoughtful, OPM and others were thoughtful to send me a letter that's saying that, yes, indeed, Scott, your data was breached and this nation state now has it. And that was it. That was basically it. Go about your day. And so it does. Yeah, exactly that. Good luck. So it's more important and valuable to get that stuff right than you often think. And that's certainly true. I mean, we're filming this and recording it in early April. And so it was just, last week or a little bit more with 23andMe filing for bankruptcy. So, again, lots of anxiety for those folks who have shared their very critical data. So yeah, no arguments with you there.
Yeah, I would say maybe you perceive this at Raytheon or not, but there is a perception that that the cybersecurity efforts, or at least the regulation, it's necessary to extract value out of the transaction. Meaning it must be slower, or it has to inject burden, or it has to make things perform less. And I think if I were to say the stream that we're trying to paddle up against is we're trying to challenge that, is that it doesn't have to extract value. Like, it could add value into the system if you just thought about it differently.
Yeah, I mean, my take on it, after talking with over the years a number of cyber folks, either on the those doing the work, those, as you say, doing on the audit side, or those just selling into the marketplace, is that unfortunately most teams, most people, even folks in the federal space, do think of cyber really as something they have to spend money on. They recognize it's important, certainly. Their job in some cases depends upon it, but it's not really perceived as a strategic asset. We haven't yet made that leap. There are some exceptions out there, but unfortunately, for many, the reality of it is it's a cost center, not a driver of, if you will, business value. And obviously, in the federal space, how we define that, it's a bit different. It's not about turning a profit. But again, I think just the framework or the mentality or just the way in which oftentimes cyber, generally speaking, is thought of. It's red team, it's blue team, it's compliance, it's whatever that happens to be. Often is about maybe power projection, but it's thought of, I think, very, very differently, and it's unfortunate that is the case. And you see it elsewhere, with people and teams getting laid off at Fortune 500 companies just because it's a way of cutting costs immediately. We haven't been hacked this year, at least not significantly, so we're safe and we're okay, so we can let this team of 10 go. And it's just, I think it's just very frustrating, but is what it is. And so as a result, you got to, as you well know, sell into that marketplace or reframe your value proposition in a way that is powerful. So we save 10 times, but we also do this, and this. It's understanding what somebody's bleeding neck problem, or I call it the level 10 bleeding neck problem, is. And if you can really solve for that, they tend to, you can change them in ways, or they're open to change in ways that they weren't before. But that can be a very tough sell when it's about risk reduction, not about a massive upside opportunity is my take on it. So
yeah, it's well said. I think not always like you stated, but I think people tend to enter the space out of fear.
correct.
More than out of like I'm gonna 2x my ROI. By doing cyber, it's like if I don't do this, I'm gonna half my ROI or negative ROI if something bad happens. And I think that is the unfortunate part. And I think what it really does is it spawns off all kinds of other really negative things. Like
Correct.
the thing I perceived in IT operations is like my job was to keep the system running, keep it running well, and to keep my users, like their experience, to be positive. And then the cloud of cyber comes over and like demands that I do things that impact the performance, they impact the user experience, and I must accept that that's just necessary and it's for the good of the world. And it's this like negative trade-off that we have to just swallow as if that's the only way. This was like extraordinarily highlighted. We're at a trade show. So the DoD uses a process called the risk management framework. That's their regulatory framework.
Yeah.
And we just made this cup that said, we make RMF suck less. And we were just highlighting that, like, no one will say it out loud, but everyone hates this thing. And like, we made maybe 100 cups and we couldn't keep them at our booth. They like flew, they were gone in like the first hour. And that to me was kind of like, oh yeah, everybody hates this. And then we started asking questions like, why is it so hated in the world? And it was because like IT operations, they didn't see any value in it. It was like, okay, audit's happening. Now's where like my work gets worse. Now's where I have to like focus on doing a bunch of things that I don't want to do, that I'm not paid to do, and entertain this team for a week or a month, and they're going to tell me all the things that I'm doing wrong, and I disagree with half of them. And it's this whole interaction that was like, no, that's the cultural problem around cybersecurity and IT operations that we intend to change.
Yeah, no, and I think that's great because it is often an emotional response to things rooted in, grounded in reality, no question about it, where if you can, create some sort of hook so that you're never having a shallow conversation, say in the sales space around specs sheets or features and stuff, but you're getting to outcome and then you're getting to transformation or something that they never even thought was possible, however small that might be for that particular team, maybe the economic buyer, hopefully both, because that way everybody's aligned instantaneously. It really just shifts the entire conversation, and all of a sudden people can start to get maybe not excited about it, but they can just feel relief and have a belief system around that belief that, in fact, they made the right decision by choosing you and your team, or a piece of it, or whatever that happens to be. It's just, again, about shifting people so that change ends up being something they look forward to. They don't grit their teeth and think, okay, here comes Jason again, and he's going to make my life hard, and he's going to do all these things to me, even though, of course, that's simply not true, and everyone, objectively knows that. So yeah. What does for you and the team, either for the rest of this year and in a next year, what does scale look like for you and the team, now?
For us, I mean, our kind of like laser focus is we look for burden. Burden is the thing that is our red flag that there is a problem to solve there. And our development team is so fantastic at always pushing us to like remember who we're building the product for. Just always remember it has to be solving the problem of our personas that we're building the product for. And so for us, scale is like how do we find the burden in those people and put the solution in their hands that actually solves their problem. So one of our early learnings when we first launched is it wasn't that our end users had to use our products, is that they wanted to. And so as a cyber product, the learning for us is like it actually solved a pain point. Like they got hours back in their day. So we were able to measure it by saying like they can spend less time in the office because now there's a thing that they don't have to do. And so we called it burden reduction. And then we're like, if we actually find the real problem and solve the actual problem, not the stated problem, and I'll say that is different many times,
Yeah. Yep.
We hear it often, like, here's the problem. And then we start asking the people, like the person that stated the problem never has done the work. They're not in the chain at all. And then when you talk to those people, you're like, oh, it's actually something wildly different.
Yeah.
So when you actually solve that problem, then it feels like magic, and the users in the system want to participate as opposed to like the obligatory participation.
Yeah. No, I think that's true. Where you can do exactly that, truly understand what the problem is with the person or team that's experiencing it, and then truly solve it. It's sort of like a job interview where you can talk with the recruiter, and they might understand a company that they work for very well, but not necessarily the actual team who's doing X work with Node.js and some other very technical piece or component stuff or cloud-based infrastructure, whatever it happens to be, AI, of course. And you just get a very different perspective on what it is that they're really, truly frustrated with, and can you help them with that particular technical and then ultimate business challenge with the broader team. And if you can do that, you just become immediately valuable, and nobody forgets who you are after that. Yeah.
It also it informed us of at least with our software, by knowing where the problem exists, you can amplify value back up the chain. So in terms of IT operations and compliance, we found that there's an interesting shift when we started looking at where the burden actually lies, because we would hear from cyber folks, people we're in the community, of the problems, right? But a lot of the cyber folks didn't actually own the work that must be done. It was IT operations. So if you think about it in terms of like a door and a lock, right? IT operations is the door. The compliance and regulatory folks are the lock. So like you can take the lock off and the door still works. But if you take the door off, no lock's necessary, right? The whole thing falls apart. And so when we started digging into that, we're like, you know what? I think the world right now is tending to revolve around regulation and compliance, but it actually should revolve around the IT operations shop. Like they're the ones that do the work. They're the ones that have the hands on the keyboards. They're the ones that make the changes on the security controls. And we just got this backwards, and we need to realign.
Yeah, no, it's so true. My background's in computer on the networking side, so things Cisco and Juniper gear back in the day, border gateway protocols, all that sort of stuff. When it was,
tree, remember that stuff?
Spanning tree protocol, yes. Back when that was not always easy to configure.
No,
and the Cisco gear was very good gear for what it was, as well as the OS and stuff. But just like you say, a lot of manual work, and I think even today there's still a huge amount of, we could call it sysadmin or manual work that is being done, and that will change. But it does require people, bodies, decision-making, and a bunch of other stuff. So I guess leading into the next question here, you guys obviously have a clear understanding of your immediate customer, and obviously you have experience within the DoD, as it is the big 800-pound gorilla. How do you guys find or uncover the deep intel that does give you decision superiority, as I like to call it, over competitors in the marketplace? Obviously, there are RFPs or whatever the DoD has is the equivalent. Those are standardized, and we, could talk about that. But I think the important piece is, how do you guys navigate having that decision superiority so you do win that $25 million or that contract that saved $25 million, or other sorts of things within the DoD marketplace, if you will?
Yeah, the simple answer is we care about the users, the lowest users. Like if you think about the RFP, how that comes out, like what's really happening there is it's someone high up in the chain is contemplating some work that must be done over 5 years and trying to rationalize a solution that is so complex down at the detailed level. I don't know how it ever produces any results, because what it doesn't do it doesn't contemplate agility and changes over times and movement in the kind of conditions on the field. It's like, in the, Doge world today, they're looking at $500 million contracts over 10 years. And it's like, how could that possibly be agile? Because the secret sauce is like, it does not care about the lowest level guy that must walk into the office and log into the thing and make a change. And so our secret sauce is we go talk to that guy and just like, what do you do? How's this work for you? And then lo and behold, they have amazing things to tell us, and if we take that honest feedback and we're like, you know what the problem actually is here is like, if this little workflow improved 5%, that translates into 90% at the end of the chain. It gets better the whole way through. And like, if you were to just ask the senior leadership, they would say like, the problem is maybe the documentation's wrong. But all the way down here, that's not actually it. It's just a symptom or a result. And so again, when I say we paddle upstream, like we're constantly paddling upstream because like it's not popular to say like, well, let's talk to Jeff, the junior sysadmin. Let's see what he thinks. No, nobody cares about Jeff. It's like,
no.
Well, we do. Like,
yeah. No, it's true. It's, the folks at the bottom have the most amount of doo-doo that falls out of the sky and hits them constantly.
Yeah. A lot of great ideas come out of the sky.
Yes.
Hey, Jeff, I have a great idea for you. And he's like, I don't care about that.
Yeah, no, it's true. I was, in that role for a number of years, and it's something you really don't forget, because it is those technical trade-off choices in some cases that you have to make, and you don't officially have maybe that decision-making authority, but it has a huge impact on your team and the organization, and could come back to bite you in some way. So it's no surprise that a lot of people are very or understandably risk averse, particularly in a DoD environment, the federal space in general, of course. So yeah, it's just and it's not always easy to find someone to turn to. So even if it is your immediate boss, let alone going up chains of command when obviously the priorities are different. It's it's a challenging space, and one in which the answers aren't always easy. And if you're an outsider thinking standard private business, it just doesn't work in quite the same way, and it's tough to explain. So
again, our dev team, they're a couple of guys that are just fantastic, but they will always say, like, when we're evaluating a new feature, an idea, they always ask the question of like, well, what if we did nothing? Because sometimes the answer is just to stop doing something. And we found that to be true. Where we look at a workflow and we're like, the cheapest thing to do to solve this is to just not do it anymore. Produces no value. So the answer is don't pay us anything. Just stop doing that. Does nothing for you.
Yeah, no, it is true. We often think we need to take endless action, and you hear about that, mindset gurus, to just practical doing, to augmenting your capability, to a million different stories about it. But it's so true. Sometimes actually doing less is the most important thing of all. Excuse me, and.
Sometimes folks forget why the process even exists. It's just existed so long. No one asks, like, what is the value to this? Like, what does it produce? And you're like, I don't know. It's just the rules. We have to do it. And it's like, what if you didn't do it?
Yeah, no, it's true. I guess, thinking about before a break here, a short break, what do you think, transitioning slightly, what do you think is most misunderstood in the marketplace today about what your company does? We've kind of hinted and talked around it a bit. But is there something that either the DoD, broadly speaking, if we can call that the marketplace, or it's, again, who you're selling into at the DoD, what is it, do you think, that is most misunderstood about what you and the team do?
It's a great question. It's a hard one too. I think there's a big push in the world today that everyone must consider AI. But I don't know if everyone's really sat back and answered the question of why AI in a particular context, and specifically in a business context. Because the question I always ask is like, it's cool, it's neat to chat with, but what problem is it solving for you in your workday? And I think a lot of times when we talk about our tech, it's like we didn't invent some crazy new sci-fi magical thing. We just applied the technology of today in a very specific way to a very specific workflow. And like when you do that and it actually solves a problem, that's what feels like magic. But it wasn't a giant large language model that's chatting with you. It just accomplishes the thing that must be done in the most efficient way. And so I think the thing we encounter is questions like, when's Pylon going to have AI? And it's like, well, for what? Like what's the problem that we're solving with AI? Like you can chat with ChatGPT today and it's fantastic, but does that help you move the ball from your system into the authorization effort? Like, does that solve that for you, or you just want someone to talk to? And like, I'll talk to you for free.
Yeah, no, it is interesting, and I think for that junior developer or network person or somebody else up and down the I'll call it the ops team, they're so overburdened right now with just stuff to do.
So
much. They'll go ahead and play with it. Maybe they'll look at some AI agents. They'll play with some workflows on some different orchestration layers that are available out there for free or some small nominal sum. There's a variety, lots of things out there that I think are really very cool and I think will be powerful. But it's a question of, how are we truly applying this, and what does that look like? What's the infrastructure look like at the DoD? I'm sure they're going to have it be secret, TOPS, TS, et cetera, the different levels, and whatnot. So it's just, I think sometimes it's nice to play with in the context of one's immediate work, but you've got, 20 different fires that are burning and only can handle 3 of them. So which ones do you do until you start getting screamed at?
I agree. It does some amazing administrative stuff. We use it quite a bit in our company. I think that's part of the math of scale. We've avoided having to hire folks because we were able to offload it to AI tools. It's our marketing team is very small and super efficient. They're able to run really lean because of AI and a lot of the copy work that it can do. And it's incredible. But in a large organization where you're talking multiple groups, where the chain of custody of the work is extraordinarily complex, a generalized chatting model, it doesn't quite finish the process. There's still a structured workflow that has to happen. And so, my mind always goes to like, it's cool, but how does it inject into this very complex workflow? And if you don't think about that, it's kind of just a shiny widget for the organization.
Yeah, no, I think that makes a lot of sense. Well, why don't we go ahead and take a short break, and we will be right back. Purple Finch Group helps technology CEOs innovating at the edge of chaos create operational fitness across their technology stack and team of talent. Achieving significant and measurable scale, selling your story, and finding time to think and plan can feel like a bridge too far. So if you're a CEO whose company has found product market fit, but is struggling, or you're a CEO whose company is looking to accelerate existing momentum, we can help with proven blueprints for optimal scale. Shifting from incremental addition to exponential multiplication can be absolutely achieved with less effort and stress. To get in touch, I can be reached at Scott with 2 T's at purplefinchgroup.com. Now, back to the interview. Well, we are back here on the Disciplined Troublemakers podcast with Jason. And so let me go ahead now post short break and shifting the questioning just a little bit here, which is what types of work did you do now as the CEO that you enjoy most or gives you the most energy? Is there anything there in your role that you really, really like?
Man. I always find the questions about being a CEO to be the most challenging, because I don't think that when I was young, I was I had a vision of like, this is what I'm going to be, like, Mom, I'm going to be a CEO. Like, I don't think I ever had that kind of vision. Sometimes I feel like it just happened to me, where the reality of it is like, I think my wife would probably agree with this statement that I tend to be a deviant, and I tend to like to challenge the status quo, and that's what I thought I was doing. I was like, there's something wrong here. We got to fix this, and then I ended up being the CEO. So I always find those questions hard because it wasn't like an intentional action for me. It was just the thing that must be done. But I will say I really love being around people. Like, I love especially expert people. And so, as we've grown as an organization and brought on just some fantastic just subject matter experts in their field, I feel like I get to be like an observer and watching like a masterclass happen. And I think that's one of my most favorite parts is when you see it, it's like, that's amazing. And they're doing it inside of my organization. It's like, I don't even understand it most of the time, but it's absolutely incredible. And I'm just grateful that they're even here,
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think that's a sign though that, if you've attracted that caliber and not just attracted, but retained, and they, play well together in the sandbox, so to speak, you're obviously doing a great deal right. And whether that is a little bit more hands-off, maybe it is hands-on, but only from the kind of the vision side of things and so forth. And then just, if you will, to borrow a simple phrase, not micromanage them to death, but to let them go off and do their thing, provide them with, resources and so forth and accountability, but then kind of move from there. And they identify with you, that's the I think the essence of it here. You can add lots of layers and so forth, but at its core, it's about leading a group of people to some place that is in theory better and greater, not just for the team and for yourself, but ultimately for obviously your perfect client or the industry that you're in that you want to go ahead and reshape. And it doesn't have to be that complicated. It can be, but it doesn't really need to be quite that complicated. Yeah, no, it sounds good.
I agree. I found I think one of the hardest transitions into the role was kind of breaking free of maybe like an era or a culture that I grew up into, which was time-based. It's like you have to be here between this time, and that's how we know the work's getting done. And what I found is that was just a not true belief. And so like controlling time doesn't produce the result. And that was like a hard pill to swallow because I was challenged, and I don't know where I think I might have saw it on YouTube or something, where it was a logo designer and he was challenging somebody about the cost of the logo. And he's like, so if I gave you this perfect logo, and you said it was $10,000, but what if I told you it took me 5 minutes? And it kind of was like, oh, that's uncomfortable. Like how is it still worth it? And to me, that taught me that like it's a really, the functions are autonomy and trust. And what you want is the outcome, not the time, effort in it. And so why then must we be concerned about the time? Why would we penalize someone for being really efficient with their time and then taking time to like let their mind recover of the hard intellectual thought work that was done? What's wrong with that if the outcome is achieved, right? And so that took a while to settle in and be like, yeah, that's the right culture for us. Like we really have to like have this strong culture of autonomy and trust and flexibility. And what we measure is the outcomes, the results, not the effort prior to the result.
Oh yeah, no, I mean, but you think about, most of us going to school was regimented. There were, calendar and times and everything, and you were expected or you learned to observe and measure yourself within that. And when you think about most professionals, whether it's, CPAs, lawyers, most people, and about even in the Fed space, you have to very carefully as a contractor document what you've done and with the amount of time that you've used. Otherwise, that's otherwise known as fraud. So there's all sorts of mechanisms. And when you think about going in to sell, everyone's trying to then compare you And so it's why, specs and feature sets are so prominent, is because you can just, like buying a new computer, you can just line all that stuff up in a spreadsheet or equivalent and then just look very quickly and efficiently. But it doesn't really get to the unique context that you might have, which as you've explained, is really your team's creative abilities and everything else. And does that foster that to the very best that you guys are capable of? And the answer is no. You need trust, and you need autonomy, and you need a few these other ingredients. And if that's truly in place, you can then go ahead and create all sorts of cool things in the sandbox. But without it, it ends up being very constricted, which I think somewhat paradoxically, maybe in a compliance space where you might expect that to happen, it can't happen without what you've just described, which I think, again, is reflective of controlling versus kind of, if you will, it's a cliche, but empowering in ways that makes things different for people who are trying to solve some very complex challenges with the DoD, which is not easy to do and do well and consistently.
Yeah, it's thought work. We think of ourselves as thought workers, and now we really have to think about how do we be the best thought workers. Well, I know for me, I can answer that question of someone creating stress on my mind, and like pressuring doesn't unlock really efficient thought work. And so like that's another hard truth, where time off is almost as valuable, maybe more valuable in thought workers than time on. And so it creates this like uncomfortable tension where you have to be like, yeah, you should take some time off. And the goal is so that your mind can unwind, because the reality of thought work is you just get wound up around really complex ideas, and it's almost like a spring. If you don't let the spring unwind, it just breaks at some point. And so we have to hold, like as one of our values, that you got to have the freedom to not do thought work so that you can do thought work really efficiently. And I know in the government that is a crazy concept, like that the time off is actually good for the work product, and that it's very challenging to like for a lot of those folks to encounter that.
Yeah, no, for me, whenever I have that spring that gets wound up personally, for me, that's time, assuming weather permitting, it's not in January or December or something, getting out of my Ducati and just going ahead and riding out. I'm just outside of
KTM.
DC. Oh, do you really? Very nice.
Yeah.
So I'm just outside of DC, so not that far away is the Virginia Piedmont, and it's just a comfortable place to which ride, greenery, all those sorts of things. And because you do need to be ideally present when you're riding a motorcycle, there are consequences if you're not. It forces you to live in the present moment.
Related? We might be related.
So it's just, I think, it is important, and you don't realize it until you stop being able to produce quality content or come up with that unique solution, and you just find yourself stuck in a way that is just something you can't or find difficult to unwind. And so for me, I've got a few things, that martial arts and one or two others that are consistently able to break me out of that cycle. And I think we all need to identify with whatever that might be. If it's simply going to the beach and reading a book, or it's getting on your KTM, or it's something else, whatever those things are, spend real time intentionally refining those, if you will, so that you really get to the essence of what that joy actually is. And that's really powerful. Yeah.
100% agree. I love to adventure ride. That's the thing that owns putting the bags on and then going out into the wilderness 100 miles away from anything. And I think there's important realities there, that we like to talk about it in our culture, because you have to acknowledge the spaces where you can actually do that. Because to not be working does not necessarily mean that your mind is unwinding. And so like we talk about shower ideas a lot. It's like, I had a shower idea. Well, the interesting thing is like, why does one have ideas in the shower? Why is that a common thing? And my belief is because you can't do anything else in the shower. You can't have a screen. There's water everywhere. So you're kind of there on your own. Again, you're by yourself with just you and your mind. And so your mind has to unwind. It's like boredom is this critical ingredient into the thought worker, where you have to seek the space where your mind can do nothing else. And then that's where it kind of unloads, and then the ideas start to flow. But I think we are big on culture. Well, I think culture trumps everything. And I've read a book recently that I can't remember the author's name. It was Recoding America, I think was the book. Okay. Jennifer, I don't want to get her name wrong. Palka? Fantastic book. Her statement is culture eats policy all day long. Like, you can have rules everywhere. If your culture doesn't support it, it doesn't matter. And for me, it's like the culture is everything. That is the true secret sauce. Like, I would say behind Pylon is that we really, really, really care about culture, because it's the bedrock for all the thought work that must happen. And we have to do everything we can to protect it, because it's so very fragile. Like, it's just the most, one bad drop of ink, it just ruins the culture. And so it's like guarding it constantly.
Yeah, no, I think, that drop of ink, red ink, I don't know, into a glass of water or something, you can't, once it's there, you cannot extract it back out again. Yeah, no, it's true. It's so true. How has, I guess, kind of the semifinal question here, how has being the CEO of your company, how has that either transformed you? How has that reshaped you in a way? Because you've been doing it for a while. This will be your 14th year.
Yeah.
So you've had a real feel for how you've shifted, I would imagine, over those 14 years. Is there, a single thing in particular, or anything that you might want to highlight that you feel, comfortable with sharing with the audience?
Yeah, I think it's very much challenged my kind of view of the world and of our kind of workforce, and even I would say being a dad most importantly. And you encounter people's view of reality, and it doesn't matter what you think about that at all. It's just like your children, you encounter their view of reality, and to them it is real, and that is true. And there's nothing that you can force to make it different. So it kind of forced me to observe it and participate, because everyone has a little bit different take on reality. And I guess it was a sense of, I don't control this, and I can't control it, and I also shouldn't. I just merely have to accept it and understand what the view of reality is, and then the goal is to align. And it's kind of a vulnerable position, but I don't know any other way to deal with that. It's maybe akin to trust, right? I can't force you to trust me, Scott. I can only offer trust to you. That's my only card I have to play in the trust scenario. And so when we're dealing with an organization, it's a bit of that, where it's like, I have to accept your view of reality and offer trust. And that's where we start. And then we start talking about how do we align and start collaborating. And it's a very vulnerable condition, but I think it just has to be that way.
Yeah, no, I think we're reminded of that a lot now, in terms of people's perception of what objective reality is, or what's important to them, the way they see the world. And I think the analogy around kids is great, because that shifts so quickly, typically, too, as they get older or have particular experiences that are very powerful. And we've all had them. And I think we've all can look back on our lives and say, okay, I did believe this for this period of time, but it obviously turned out to be something else, or my awareness shifted, and I now perceive that as being something different. Yeah, it's a great way to, I think, remind us all how temporary that is. Yeah. And
there's consequences too if you approach it wrong, right? Like, I could go to my kids and say, your reality's wrong, and here's why. All I'm really doing is pushing myself outside of the circle of the things that they're going to talk to me about, right? Like, I'm the one that gets the consequence in that. Like, I don't actually change their reality. And so I believe the way I have to encounter it is to be like, yeah, tell me more. I want to be inside your circle. Like, I want to know more of why that is important to you, why you think about that. And it's this fine dance of staying inside that line of like, you can trust me to talk to you about that, and we can work together to achieve the end goal. And what I realize is that it's the same in the workforce. There's no difference, right? We're just dealing with adults rather than children, but it's the exact same engagement.
Yeah, no, it is so true, and it's certainly been my experience professionally, either again in my old roles or this one now, is where a CEO, a tech CEO, might be in his or her head is where they are, and that's the experience that they're having. Be that good or challenging or a bit of both. It is so true. We're meeting people where they are in time and space is essential and really critical, because that's where the connection happens, and it's not any place else by sort of ramming stuff either in their direction or telling them that they're wrong. And I think we make that mistake too often, unfortunately.
Totally agree. I think we can accept anybody where they're at and disagree with them. They can be totally true. Like, agreement cannot be the condition of acceptance. So you can be like, you're wildly wrong, but it's cool. Let's talk, right? Like, acceptance first, then we can talk about disagreement,
Yeah, no, it's so true. Well, with that, let's go ahead and finish out the interview. How would you, for folks who want to, how would you like people to get in touch with you? Would that be either via LinkedIn or maybe your website or something else? What would be best for that?
Yeah, I'm on LinkedIn quite a bit. That's a great place to reach out. And then our website, pylonsecure.com. We would love to show you our software. Well, obviously, we're very proud of it. I'm clearly biased, but anybody who wants to see it, I'd love to show it to them. And so there's some ways to contact us through the website. But yeah, either of those would be great.
Yeah, sounds good. Well, Jason, thank you very much for carving out time to chat with us today here on the Disciplined Troublemakers podcast. And to all of you out there either watching or listening, we'll be back with another episode very soon. Cheers.
Thank you, Scott.
Thank you for tuning into the Disciplined Troublemakers podcast, and we hope you found the episode valuable. If you did, please subscribe to the Disciplined Troublemakers podcast on your favorite platform and leave a review. Putting this podcast together is a group effort, so I'd like to provide a shout out to Heartcast Media and their team for all of the assistance they provide with each episode. If you want to get in touch with me directly, I can be reached at Scott with 2 T's at purplefinchgroup.com. Purple Finch Group is the sponsor of this podcast. We have another podcast episode out very shortly. Stay tuned.